Hey there, you're looking kind of cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out all my other socials. Enjoy. The sun tried to shine through the thick morning mist as an old taxi drove up to the big gates of Whitmore College. A tired traveler got out. He looked messy and didn't fit in with the fancy building. He yawned and stretched. His brown hair was tangled from a long night staring out the cab window. He wore a faded gray t-shirt and old jeans that showed he'd been on the road for a while. After paying the driver more than he could really afford, he said goodbye and stood alone. He dragged his big suitcase toward the large house. In the quiet of Whitmore, he was about to start at a special school. He'd won a scholarship. That meant he had talent, even if it hadn't shown much before. It got him into this famous school and gave him a real shot at a better future. He'd signed every paper the school sent without reading all the fine print. Who actually reads the small print anyway? The stone path went through neat gardens and led to some old buildings covered with ivy. Other students walked around the open yard, but something was strange. He looked closer, confused. The girls wore long dresses with high necks and big skirts. The boys wore the same thing? "You must be Paul Morrison." A woman in her 50s approached, wearing a severe black dress with buttons up to her chin. "I'm Mrs. Blackwood, Dean of Student Affairs. You're late for orientation." "Sorry, my flight was delayed and—" "No matter. Follow me. We need to get you properly attired before the welcome ceremony." She turned on her heel and marched toward a building labeled Wardrobing Department. Paul grabbed his bags and hurried after her, his sneakers squeaking on the damp stones. "Excuse me, Mrs. Blackwood? I think there might be some confusion. Those guys back there were wearing the traditional Whitmore uniform, yes. Established in 1847 when the college was founded. All students wear period-appropriate attire. It's clearly stated in Section 12, subsection 4 of your enrollment agreement. The wardrobing department occupied the entire first floor of a Victorian-era building. Racks of dresses in various sizes lined the walls. Burgundy velvet seemed to be the predominant color, though Paul spotted some in deep green and navy blue as well. "Mr. Morrison requires a full uniform set," Mrs. Blackwood announced to a thin man with measuring tape draped around his neck. "Standard male student issue." Of course. This way, young man." Paul found himself ushered into a fitting room, while the tailor, Mr. Finch according to his name tag, began pulling items from various shelves and racks. "I really think there's been a mistake. I can't wear a dress. I'm here on an athletic scholarship for track and field." "All students participate in athletics wearing the approved sporting attire," Mr. Finch replied, holding up a burgundy velvet dress with white lace at the collar and cuffs. "Now arms up, please." "This is insane. I'm not wearing that." Mrs. Blackwood's voice carried through the curtain. "Mr. Morrison, you signed a legally binding agreement. You can either comply with the dress code or forfeit your scholarship and enrollment. The choice is yours." The full weight of the situation crashed down on him. Without this scholarship, he couldn't afford college. His parents had already sold their car to help with expenses. There was no plan B. "Fine." The word came out as barely a whisper. "But this is completely ridiculous." Mr. Finch helped him out of his t-shirt and jeans, then began the process of dressing him in the Victorian ensemble. First came the white cotton chemise, soft against his skin. Then the corset, not tightly laced, Mr. Finch assured him, just enough to provide the proper silhouette. "I can't breathe in this thing." "You'll adjust. Everyone does." Next came the cage crinoline, a framework of steel hoops that would hold the skirt's shape. Paul stared at the contraption in disbelief. "How am I supposed to sit down?" "Carefully, you'll learn." The petticoats came next, 3 layers of them, the first of plain white cotton, the second of silk that whispered against the first, and the third of starched cotton with ruffled edges. Despite his mortification, Paul couldn't help noticing how smooth the silk felt, how it seemed to float around his legs. Finally, Mr. Finch lowered the burgundy velvet dress over his head. The weight of it surprised him, easily 10 pounds of fabric. The bodice fitted snugly over the corset, with dozens of tiny buttons running up the back. The skirt fell to the floor, hiding his feet completely. Now for the accessories. Black wool stockings that reached above his knees, black leather boots with small heels that buttoned up the sides, white kid gloves that extended past his wrists, a small burgundy hat with a white feather that pinned to his brown hair. There, perfectly presentable. Mr. Finch drew back the curtain, and Paul caught sight of himself in the full-length mirror. A stranger stared back, someone who looked like they'd stepped out of a historical photograph. The burgundy velvet gave his pale skin a warm glow. The fitted bodice and full skirt created an hourglass silhouette he'd never imagined his body could achieve. Excellent fit, Mrs. Blackwood approved. You'll receive 4 complete uniforms, plus appropriate nightwear and sporting attire. Mr. Finch will have them delivered to your dormitory room this afternoon. Paul tried to take a step and nearly tripped. The combination of the heavy skirts and unfamiliar heels threw off his balance completely. How does anyone walk in this? Practice, Mrs. Blackwood said. Now come along. The welcome ceremony begins in 20 minutes. The walk across campus became a lesson in Victorian deportment. Paul learned to take smaller steps, to hold his skirts when climbing stairs, to navigate doorways without catching the crinoline on the frame. Other students passed by, all dressed in similar period attire, none of them giving him a second glance. The ceremony took place in a grand hall with soaring ceilings and stained glass windows. Paul found an empty seat, carefully arranging his skirts as he'd seen others do. The silk petticoats rustled with every movement, a constant reminder of his bizarre situation. "First time?" the student beside him whispered. She wore a green velvet dress with black trim, her red hair pinned up in an elaborate style. "Is it that obvious?" "You keep tugging at your collar. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. I'm Janet, by the way. 3rd year, biology major." "Paul. 1st year, undecided." "Word of advice? Request extra petticoats from Mr. Finch. The silk ones are much more comfortable than the cotton, especially when you're sitting through long lectures." The ceremony droned on for 2 hours. Speeches about tradition, academic excellence, and the unique Whitmore experience. Paul shifted constantly, trying to find a comfortable position. The corset dug into his ribs. The weight of the dress pressed down on his shoulders. But the silk petticoats Janet had mentioned did feel surprisingly pleasant, creating a cushion of soft fabric between him and the hard wooden bench. Afterward, Paul followed the campus map to his assigned dormitory. Holloway Hall, room 314. He climbed 3 flights of stairs, holding his burgundy skirts high to avoid tripping, already sweating from the exertion. The door stood open, revealing a spacious room with 2 beds, 2 desks, and 2 wardrobes. "You must be my roommate," a cheerful voice called out. Another student emerged from behind one of the wardrobes, wearing a burgundy dress identical to Paul's. Tall and athletic, with close-cropped black hair and an easy smile. "I'm Marcus, football team." "Well, what passes for football here? You should see the uniforms we have to wear for practice, bloomers and petticoats under divided skirts. Completely insane, but surprisingly mobile once you get the hang of it." "Paul, track and field. Please tell me this gets easier." "Give it a week. By then, you'll barely notice the corset. By the end of the month, you'll be requesting extra crinolines for better shape. Happens to everyone." Marcus wasn't wrong. The first week passed in a blur of classes, meals in the Great Hall, and constant adjustments to his new wardrobe. Paul learned to sit sideways on benches to accommodate the crinoline. He mastered the art of holding his skirts while climbing the endless stairs. He discovered that eating large meals in a corset was impossible, leading to smaller, more frequent snacks throughout the day. The academic work proved challenging but engaging. His literature professor, Dr. Hammond, conducted classes entirely in period-appropriate language and mannerisms. His chemistry professor, Dr. Chen, somehow managed to perform complex experiments while wearing full Victorian dress, never once catching her sleeves on fire. Track practice presented unique challenges. The sporting attire consisted of knee-length bloomers worn under a divided skirt, with the same corset and petticoats underneath. Running felt strange at first, the extra fabric creating drag and throwing off his rhythm, But gradually he adapted. His times suffered initially, then slowly improved as he learned to work with the costume rather than against it. "Looking good out there, Morrison," Coach Williams called out after a particularly strong 400-meter sprint. She wore the same athletic ensemble as her runners, moving with practiced ease despite the layers. "You're finally getting the hang of it." 3 weeks into the semester, Paul stood before Mr. Finch once again. "I'd like to request some modifications to my uniforms." Of course. What did you have in mind?" "Extra petticoats, the silk ones, and maybe, could we let out the skirts a bit? Add more volume?" Mr. Finch smiled knowingly. "Happens every year. The gentlemen always resist at first, then discover the comfort of proper foundation garments. I'll have the modifications completed by Monday." The changes made a remarkable difference. The additional silk petticoats created a smoother silhouette and added cushioning when seated. The fuller skirts balanced better with the fitted bodice, making movement feel more natural. Paul found himself checking his reflection in windows and mirrors, adjusting his posture to show the dress to best advantage. "See? Told you," Marcus said one evening as they studied together. "Last year, I actually requested a tighter corset, better back support during long study sessions. I can't believe I'm saying this, but you might be right. My posture's never been better." October arrived with a burst of color in the trees surrounding campus. Paul had settled into a routine: classes in the morning, track practice in the afternoon, studying in the evening. The burgundy velvet dress no longer felt like a costume, but simply what he wore. His drawers at home, filled with jeans and t-shirts, seemed to belong to a different person entirely. "Morrison, got a minute?" Janet flagged him down after British literature. "What's up?" "Some of us are organizing a shopping trip to town this weekend. There's a vintage clothing store that specializes in Victorian reproduction pieces. Want to come?" The invitation surprised him. In high school, he'd been friendly enough with classmates but never particularly social. Here, wearing the same unusual uniforms seemed to create an instant bond between students. "Sure. What time?" The town of Whitmore on Hudson sat 3 miles from campus, connected by a tree-lined road perfect for autumn walks. The group of 8 students made quite a sight in their full Victorian dress, but the townspeople were well accustomed to the college's eccentric traditions. The vintage shop occupied a narrow building squeezed between a cafe and a bookstore. Inside, racks of period-appropriate clothing filled every available space. Paul found himself drawn to a section of silk petticoats in various colors: ivory, pale pink, lavender. "The colored ones are lovely under the burgundy velvet," the shopkeeper advised. "They just peek out when you walk." He selected 3, one in ivory, one in rose pink, and after some deliberation, one in pale lavender. At the register, he also added a bottle of lavender water, remembering Janet's advice about freshening petticoats between washes. "Never thought I'd see the day," Marcus laughed as they walked back to campus, packages in hand. "Paul Morrison, shopping for pretty underthings." "They're practical," Paul protested, but he was smiling. "The silk breathes better than cotton." November brought the first snow and midterm exams. Paul spent long hours in the library, his burgundy skirts spread around him like a velvet pool. The corset did provide excellent back support during marathon study sessions, just as Marcus had claimed. He'd taken to wearing the lavender petticoat on exam days, a small rebellion against the uniform requirements that no one could see, but made him feel more confident. "You've been different lately," his mother observed during their weekly video call. "More, I don't know, comfortable with yourself?" "It's a good school, Mom. I'm learning a lot." "Your posture's improved. And is that a new hairstyle?" He touched his brown hair self-consciously. He'd been growing it out, partly because the campus barber specialized in period-appropriate styles, and partly because longer hair looked better with the small hats that completed their uniforms. "Just trying something different." After Thanksgiving break, spent on campus because traveling in full Victorian dress seemed too complicated, something shifted in Paul's mindset. The thought of returning to his old wardrobe, even for a few days, felt wrong somehow. The jeans and t-shirts in his dorm room drawers remained untouched, gradually pushed to the back to make room for extra petticoats and spare gloves. "Can I ask you something?" he said to Marcus one evening in early December. They were preparing for the winter formal, helping each other with the dozens of buttons on their formal gowns, deep purple velvet with silver trim, reserved for special occasions. "Shoot, do you ever think about staying this way? After graduation, I mean?" Marcus paused in his buttoning. "Honestly, yeah, there's something about it. Like I've been playing a character my whole life, and this is who I'm supposed to be. Does that make sense?" "More than you know." The winter formal took place in the same grand hall where Paul had attended his first ceremony. But now, instead of feeling awkward and constrained, he moved through the space with practiced grace. The purple velvet gown felt special, festive. He'd styled his brown hair in soft waves that framed his face, secured with silver combs that matched the dress trim. "You look lovely tonight," Janet said, approaching with 2 cups of punch. She wore an emerald green gown that complemented her red hair perfectly. "Thanks. You too." They stood together, watching couples dance to the string quartet. The men led, the women followed, all in identical formal gowns, the only difference the color of their partners' dresses. "I've been thinking about next semester," Paul said suddenly. "About making some changes." "What kind of changes?" "I want to go by a different name. It doesn't fit anymore." "Hasn't for a while." Janet smiled. "I wondered when you'd get there. Happened to my roommate last year." "Have you picked something?" "Allie, it feels right." "It suits you." The spring semester began with Paul officially registering as Allie with the campus administration. The change required nothing more than filling out a form. Whitmore had seen enough students discover new aspects of themselves to make the process simple. "Allie Morrison," Coach Williams read from her roster at the first track practice. "Good to have you back." The name felt like slipping into a comfortable pair of shoes, or in this case, the well-broken-in boots that had replaced the stiff pair from her first day. Everything about her movement had changed over the months. Where Paul had fought against the clothes, Allie worked with them. Her running times improved dramatically once she stopped seeing the uniform as a hindrance. "You're different," Marcus observed one evening as they studied for their biology midterm. "More yourself somehow." "I've been thinking about hormones," Allie admitted. "The campus health center offers them. Full coverage under the student insurance." "Good for you. When?" "Maybe over spring break? Give me time to adjust before track season ends." The decision felt momentous, but also inevitable. Like everything at Whitmore, what seemed impossible at first became natural with time. The health center staff proved supportive and knowledgeable, walking her through the process with practiced ease. "We see several students each year," Dr. Martinez explained. "Something about the environment here helps people discover who they really are." The changes came gradually. Softer skin, subtle shifts in body shape that the corset and petticoats had been mimicking all along. Allie's brown hair grew past her shoulders, thick and wavy. She learned to pin it up in increasingly elaborate styles, trading tips with Janet and other friends. "Remember your first day?" Marcus asked as they packed up their room at the end of freshman year. "You looked like you wanted to run screaming from campus." "Nearly did. Thank God for that scholarship." "Best thing that ever happened to you." Allie folded her burgundy uniform carefully, placing it in her trunk. 4 of them now, plus the formal gowns, plus all the extra petticoats and accessories she'd accumulated. Her male clothes had long since been donated to charity. The thought of wearing them again seemed as foreign as wearing a spacesuit. "What are your plans for summer?" Marcus asked. "Staying here, actually. Got a research position with Dr. Chen." "You?" "Same. Parents aren't quite ready for me to come home like this." They'd both had difficult conversations with family over the past months, some accepting, some not. But Whitmore had become home in a way their childhood houses never quite were. Sophomore year brought new challenges and opportunities. Allie declared a major in biochemistry, drawn to Dr. Chen's research on hormone therapies and their effects. She made the varsity track team, competing against other colleges who often did double takes at Whitmore's Victorian-clad athletes. "You run like you were born in those skirts," a competitor from state commented after Allie placed second in the 800 meter. "In a way, I was." The comment held more truth than jest. The person who'd stepped out of that taxi 2 years ago bore little resemblance to who Allie had become, not just physically, though the hormones had continued their gentle work, but in every aspect of her being. The confidence that came from moving through the world as herself, the friendships built on authentic connection, the academic success that followed when she stopped fighting against her own nature. "I'm thinking of staying on for graduate school," she told Janet over coffee in town. They'd become close friends, then closer, though neither had put a label on what was developing between them. "Dr. Chen's program? She's doing groundbreaking work, and I can't imagine leaving here." "I know what you mean. This place becomes part of you." Janet reached across the table, taking Allie's hand. The white gloves they both wore made the gesture feel formal and intimate simultaneously. "I'm glad you stayed that first day. I watched you during the welcome ceremony, saw how uncomfortable you were, but also saw something else. Potential, maybe. Like you were a butterfly still wrapped in a cocoon." Pretty metaphor for someone majoring in poetry. Accurate, though. Look at you now. Allie did look, catching her reflection in the cafe window. Brown hair pinned up elegantly, burgundy velvet dress fitted perfectly, posture straight and confident. But more than the external changes, she saw someone comfortable in their own skin for the first time in their life. Junior year passed in a blur of advanced coursework, research projects, and deepening relationships. Allie served as a mentor for new students, helping them adjust to Whitmore's unique requirements. She watched them go through the same journey she had. Initial resistance, gradual acceptance, eventual embrace. "The clothes are just the beginning," she told a particularly frustrated freshman. "They're like a key that unlocks something you didn't know was there." "Easy for you to say. You look like you were born to wear this stuff." "You should have seen me my first day. Ask Marcus. I was a complete disaster." But the freshman was already softening, adjusting his corset with growing familiarity. Within a month, he'd be at Mr. Finch's door, requesting extra petticoats. They always were. Senior year arrived with bittersweet anticipation. Allie had been accepted to the graduate program, ensuring 5 more years at Whitmore. But many friends would be leaving, venturing into a world that might not understand the transformation they'd undergone. "I've got a job offer in Boston," Marcus announced over dinner. "They say the dress code is business professional." I asked if that included Victorian-era gowns. What did they say? They laughed, then realized I was serious. HR is reviewing their policies. "You'll make it work. You always do." The graduating class of Whitmore stood out at any gathering. They moved differently, held themselves differently. The years in corsets and crinolines had left their mark in ways both visible and invisible. Some, like Allie, had discovered their true gender. Others had simply learned to express themselves more fully. All had been changed by the experience. "Any regrets?" Janet asked as they walked across campus on one of their last evenings as undergraduates. She'd also been accepted to graduate school in the English department. Their relationship had deepened into something permanent, solid as the stone buildings around them. About what? Not reading the fine print? Coming here without knowing what you were getting into? Allie considered the question, her burgundy skirt swishing against the cobblestones. 4 years ago, she'd walked this same path in confusion and dismay. Now it felt like coming home. Best mistake I ever made. The graduation ceremony took place on a perfect spring day. Parents and families filled the quad, some still startled by their transformed children, others having made their own journey of acceptance. Allie's parents sat in the front row, her mother dabbing at tears. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered during the reception. "You look so happy, so yourself." "I am, Mom. For the first time, I really am." Dr. Chen pulled her aside as the celebration wound down. "Ready for graduate school? I have some exciting projects lined up." "Can't wait." "Good. Oh, and I've had a request from admissions. They want someone to help rewrite the enrollment materials, make the uniform requirements more prominent, avoid surprises." Allie laughed. That would ruin everything. The surprise is part of the journey. My thoughts exactly. I told them the fine print is fine as it is. As the sun set over Whitmore College, Allie stood with Janet on the steps of Holloway Hall. They wore matching purple velvet gowns from the formal, their brown and red hair catching the golden light. In a few days, they'd move into graduate housing, beginning the next chapter of their academic careers. But for now, they simply existed in the moment, grateful for the unexpected path that had brought them here. "Think we'll ever wear regular clothes again?" Janet mused. "Why would we want to?" It was a fair question. The Victorian-era uniforms that had once seemed like bizarre imprisonment had become integral to who they were. Not just clothing, but a way of being in the world. A daily reminder that sometimes the most profound transformations come from the most unexpected requirements. The bells in the clock tower chimed the hour, their bronze voices carrying across campus. Students in burgundy velvet dresses moved along the paths, some newly arrived and still adjusting, others comfortable in their transformed selves. The tradition would continue year after year, helping young people discover truths about themselves they might never have found otherwise. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.